This is our podcast about what I think and how my opinions have changed about animated Star Wars TV show, Star Wars Rebels. So, the show itself started because Disney ended up buying Star Wars in 2012. At the time, we were all feeling kind of sad because, George Lucas lost his baby and everything, and Disney was going to ruin Star Wars somehow, which you could make the argument that they have in a way, but... So that was in 2012. The animated TV show that was going on at that time was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Awesome stuff. One of my favorite shows ever. That got canceled by Disney in 2013, and it had its last season was season 5, and that was kind of their big end. But the first Disney Star Wars thing that came out was Star Wars Rebels, which was the sequel to Clone Wars. I remember when it was coming out, but I was just so mad. And I wanted to abstain from it as much as possible because it basically, the reason of its existence was because Clone Wars got canceled even though it didn't have a proper finish. And this new kids show was the new thing. And so I just kind of stayed away from it. I remember the premiere, watching it with you. I wouldn't really give it a chance from the start. You watched it more when it was coming out and cared about it than I did. Because you actually didn't really watch Clone Wars that much. But Rebels was kind of your thing.
Well, I think I fell asleep pretty much during each Clone Wars episode.
Yeah.
And so I missed a lot of seasons after getting you guys started on it. And I think I watched the first, what was it, Siege of Lothal? Or what was the first episode or two, season 1?
First one, yeah, they were on
Rebels.
Lothal. And that's where they found the crew. And Kanan found Ezra. Because he stole one of their speeders or something that they were trying to take from the Empire, and it was on Lothal.
I just don't remember it or didn't watch the rest of the first season when it was new each week. But somewhere in season 2, especially whether I saw it by accident or whether I heard about it, I kind of got into it once Darth Vader showed up.
For me, it was a thing that was happening, and I remember you would be watching it, and I'd still stay away from it, but every once in a while there would be something that would interest me of happening, like Darth Vader showing up, right? And you would be like, hey, Darth Vader's going to be in this next one. So every so often you'd be watching it on the TV and I would maybe watch it, but I was never truly invested in it. So I do remember every once in a while there'd be a Vader episode or Ahsoka would show up or Maul and you'd be like, hey, come watch this one. And yeah, I could tell you kind of got more invested in it by season 2, which...
Well, definitely with Vader and Maul in it, was never invested in any of the Rebels crew or the actual heroes of the team. And then by then I was into it, and when they announced that Thrawn was going to be in season 3, and I was definitely committed to it because back in the early 90s I read the Thrawn trilogy and was one of the best villains in the Legends canon, and never would expect 20 to 30 years later he'd be showing up in a Rebels cartoon. So yeah. I was definitely committed just for Thrawn to follow him in seasons 3 and 4.
So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the animation in the show. You can tell has a big difference from Clone Wars to Rebels. And the style is different, but I remember when it was coming out, they said that it was going to have a Ralph McQuarrie style, where the animation was kind of inspired by the painting. But I think it looks good still. I don't know if it works completely in motion. The biggest problem for me is the character models don't look all that great, especially in season 1. At season 1, it mostly kind of looks rough. I would say the character models don't look great, but as the seasons go on, the visuals itself, different planets or different, the lighting gets better. You can tell that the animation does improve, though.
I really enjoy the McQuarrie paintings and agree. And definitely I find the use of orange.
Yeah, it is. It definitely isn't as good as Clone Wars, though. The main character of the show is Ezra Bridger, and he's just kind of this... He's really loud. He's kind of whiny.
He's kind of tough to handle.
A little bit.
Sure.
He definitely does get a little bit better. He's pretty bad in season 1. and he's got a his lightsaber's got a
gun.
It looks like a stapler gun, basically.
Stapler gun.
Yeah, Ezra's a little tough to get by. I still don't completely like him. My problem is that
it's just the yelling.
He yells everything he says. The best character, or my favorite character or newer character in the show, is definitely Kanan Jarrus, voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. He's pretty consistent, and he's pretty good for the most part. I like how he's like an abandoned kind of Padawan almost, because he was like a little Padawan when Order 66 happened, and then he was kind of left by himself, and then not even though he didn't reach like Jedi Knight or Master or anything, he still had to figure out, how am I going to teach this kid Ezra the right way to do it, even though I never really got up there. But so he's kind of just like an aged Padawan almost, because he didn't have any other training after that because of Order 66 and whatnot. But I do find him pretty interesting. My only gripe with Kanan is, spoiler, Darth Maul blinds him with his lightsabers, and he goes blind. But, like, he goes to Bendu, and Bendu's like, you gotta be able to see, like, things with the Force. And then from that point on, he's blind, but he's not. He can totally see. There's nothing he couldn't do that he can't do now. Which is like, that could have been a cool thing, is to take away his sight and have him have to figure out how to do things differently. But, like, he doesn't really change at all. And so it's just funny to see him still fighting people. He can still do basically everything, even though he's technically blind. I'm like, well, what's the point?
How about how well he was driving that speeder bike to...
Yeah, he can, like I said, he can drive, he can fly ships and drive speeder bikes and still fight with his lightsaber, and he can still see everybody. And so I'm like, well, what's the point of making him blind if he can do everything still? So Ahsoka comes back in this show, which is cool, because she's now one of the best Star Wars characters in general, and she came from Clone Wars. She's not in it very much, but when she's in it, it makes the episode actually good. She obviously has great stuff when she fights Darth Vader. Rex is in the show more than Ahsoka is. Rex is pretty good in the show, especially when you first meet him, when he's hanging out with
what happened to his buddies?
Gregor and Wolf. I don't know, he just kind of left Gregor and Wolf. I kind of wish that they were hanging out with the Rebels too. But yeah, those episodes where they go and hang out with the clones are pretty good. But I do buy that he would be a rebel. And so Darth Maul shows up in this show. And what I do like from Ezra is that that Maul wants Ezra to be his apprentice, and he calls him apprentice all the time, right? And Darth Vader shows up in the show. He doesn't show up enough.
I think he's used so sparingly. It's kind of like Darth Vader in Rogue One as well. It's so limited that he's so good in what he's in, and it leaves...
Yeah, every episode that he's in, it's good. He shows up at the very beginning of season 2, and then, like, the first 2 episodes he's in. And then he shows up again for, like, the last episode of season 2, and then you never see him when he fights Ahsoka, and then he doesn't show up again. And I'm like, hold on, this show is called Star Wars Rebels. It's about the rebels forming against the Empire. And you have the greatest, the most recognizable villain in all of fiction called Darth Vader. And James Earl Jones isn't really doing much anyways. Like, I'm sure you guys can pay him. He should have been in the show a lot more. Yeah, that's one of my complaints, is that Darth Vader's not in it enough. A dude who is in it a lot more is Thrawn, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now, you know more about him than I do, because you read the Timothy Zahn books. Could you talk about Thrawn from the books and whatnot, and what he was kind of famous for in those books?
Well, Thrawn, the blue Grand Admiral from the Chiss Ascendancy. So Chiss is his alien race, and quite mysterious in how he rose to power as being a great Grand Admiral of the Empire. And the original Timothy Zahn trilogy is set right after Return of the Jedi, for the years after Return of the Jedi. And so, of course, Darth Vader's gone, and Emperor Palpatine has been killed, and so who's the big bad villain to still be leading the Empire, and Zahn came up with this Grand Admiral Zahn. And I think who was not a a Sith or a former Jedi or all these Force things, or to be like wasn't like the Emperor and all crazy and bent on power and all those. His take that was really interesting is just very strategic, very thoughtful,
yeah, he's very strategic.
Planning, and
he's tactical.
And in some ways, and his other books have played that out as well. It's not like he's out there to rule the empire or to destroy everybody, or he's like crazy with power or anything like that. It's like this is almost like the job he's been hired for. He works for the Empire.
He's almost like a droid, but he's
he's going to accomplish what his role is and use his strategery to defeat the rebellion. Definitely a part of it that they brought forward was one of his expertise is he studied the art of different cultures, and he used his study of art to use that in his strategies and to defeat his enemies. And they brought that, so it was good they brought to Rebels exactly what he looked like from the books, how he spoke, how we would have envisioned that his cadence and how he spoke was. The story and the build-up behind him and how much fans liked him and what he meant to them was maybe greater than he came across in the cartoon. But I still think if you didn't know anything about him and just came across him in the cartoon, he's a pretty cool villain or leader of the Empire.
Yeah, I haven't read any of the books about Thrawn at all, and so my only Thrawn things that I've got is from the show Rebels. He definitely comes off as this really tactical dude who's really smart, but my problem still with him is, I was talking to you about this earlier, is that I'm like, so he's in it a lot and he shows up, but I kid you not, he doesn't win anything. Every single time the Rebels manage to get away or get what they want, and every single time Thrawn's like, that's exactly what I was planning, or that's how I wanted it, or whatever. And I'm like, did you really though? So the best episodes, I think, for sure, are those Twilight of the Apprentice episodes of the season finales, where you're at that Sith holocron place, and it's kind of just a big Jedi. It's the best because it has nothing to do with Hera, Sabine, Zeb, or it's all just about Ahsoka, Kanan, Ezra, Vader, and Maul, and the Inquisitors. The one everyone talks about is the Twin Sons episode, and I do remember you were telling me, like, when you were watching it, you're like, hey, this is the Obi-Wan episode, which Obi-Wan is my favorite Star Wars character in general. I still, to this day, everybody really, really likes that episode, and I can see why, but I still got some problems with it, which is kind of like, I feel like it's an unpopular thing to say. The whole episode's about, Obi-Wan, right, and Maul, but I wish it was just, you could see in animated form Obi-Wan just hanging out on Tatooine for something. Every single episode has at least one of the people in the crew. It never not has any of them, in which, like, you got other characters.
And it usually may start and end with all of them. It's just
so that's why you kind of get like tired of them to a point sometimes. I wish this episode was just about Obi-Wan and then Darth Maul shows up at the end. That would have been cool. But like 75% of this episode, it's like a 20 or so minute episode, and like 15 minutes of it is dedicated to Ezra goofing off and flying to Tatooine and just walking about, and then eventually Obi-Wan just finds him, which
and tells him to leave.
Tells him to buzz off. He tells him to get out of here. And so I'm like, well, wait, because Ezra's like, I gotta warn you about Maul, and he's like, I know, bro, Maul's here. Maul's coming. I know. It's like, yeah, Obi-Wan can figure that out himself. He doesn't need Ezra. At the end, Maul shows up to finally kill him, And there's this, before Rebels even came out, everybody, including me, had this cool fever dream in their head of a final duel between Obi-Wan and Maul in the desert on Tatooine. Everybody had that type of just a cool idea in their head of what that would look like. At the time, and still to this day, I was like, you're telling me that Star Wars Rebels gets to tell that story and not save that for some live action? Because like at the time, a Kenobi show wasn't in the works or announced or anything, but that's what everybody wanted for a while, was a Kenobi show, and like this is the time to do it. And now it's announced that it's going to happen, but now it's like you can't even do that anymore because Rebels already did it. So I'll still never forgive Rebels for doing it. So yeah, this is how my opinions have changed on Star Wars Rebels. I do like it more because I've seen the things that are good and whatnot. I like the Twilight of the Apprentice and the Twin Sons, and like some of the characters like Kanan and whatnot, but still, it's like I actually got around to watching it because Clone Wars actually finished with their season 7. So I felt closure that Clone Wars was finally done, because that was one of my big problems with Rebels, was that it was made because Clone Wars got canceled. But I do like it more than I did when it was coming out, but it still isn't the best thing. There's some good stuff in it, but it's not. To say the whole product itself is good, it's kind of like, it's all right, but there is some good stuff in there.